Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another game design podcast. Today, we will be discussing one of the community's favorite topics, which is lands and eras. There are quite a few questions to go over in this episode, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. Just a disclaimer, anything that is shared here can always be subject to change should the need arise. Today, David Gracia, David Delsray, and Mark Gilbert are with me, and we will find answers to frequently asked or even never asked before questions. Hello, guys, and thank you for being here with me today. Davids, we have two
Hey,
Davids.
yeah, happy to be here.
Great.
Hey, yeah, same.
Great. So yeah, we are back with a lot more questions, and we're gonna be back again with a lot more questions. Like there.
Yeah, well, really looking forward to sharing this information with the community. So yeah, let's get to it.
Awesome, awesome. So as today is the land day, I would like to start by asking about the functionality of land in Civitas and how they even look in the game.
Well, I mean, the core kind of feature of the land is that it is your space. It's something that you can customize however you want, and it's also something that you can use to explore a specific path of gameplay. So that land is going to be something that it can be bought, it can be improved, it can be it can be resold, but at the start, it's just going to be a natural space with trees and rivers and mountains, etc. And as you develop it, you're going to kind of explore a more specific targeted path, the kind of gameplay that appeals to you most, and that's what you're going to use your land as kind of a home base for that.
Mhm. Great. So how does the land really look like? Like, is it a square? Is it a rectangle? Like
Oh, it's a hexagon. All the lands are hexagons. So the entire
hexagon?
world, we basically, yeah, we turned the entire world into hexagons. So every tile in the city, every tile in the wildlands, it's all going to be a hexagon tile.
Okay, so we have a lot of hexagons there.
Whole lot of hexagons, yeah.
That is definitely awesome. So so thank you very much. Now that we
Mhm.
know like how land plays a crucial role in the gameplay, so does it also play a role in forming a city? Like, do you need to have a land to form a city?
Well, to have a city, the most important thing that you need in the city is a tower. So the city is comprised of the lands that surround the tower. Now, that doesn't necessarily include all of the lands around a tower. So it's going to start relatively small. And if you buy land that is close to the tower, you're going to be part of the city. You're going to have voting rights within that city. But as you level up the tower, that radius around the tower that it encapsulates the city expands. So it's possible that you can get a free land that could become a part of the city based on your proximity to the tower. However, there are going to be hexagons all over the world that are not connected to a tower in any way.
Okay, so there are some hexagons that are a part of city or a part of a tower, actually, but there are some also that are not any part of it at all.
Yeah, so you've got a tower, right? Then you've got towers spread throughout the world, and then around each tower there are going to be six individual kind of city center tiles, and those tiles are going to be used for construction of specific structures that benefit the entire city. Now, around those external six tiles, you're going to have, and this is going to vary between, from city to city, but you're going to have a range that extends from the tower that kind of encapsulates additional land tiles. And so, yeah, those land tiles are part of the city. And again, as we level up the city and as the city becomes larger, that radius expands. And the important thing to note is that each tower provides a certain amount of protection to land tiles that are close by, protects it from the blight and the rot and these sources of conflict that seem to undermine your progress.
Yeah, I got it,
Mm.
got it. That's
Something that David didn't mention was that all of the towers will be placed by us. So the location of the city will be determined uh, by us in prior of the launch of the game. So the players will not have to think about where to place a city or so on. They will just have to choose the city that they want to be part of and hopefully expand it as much as they can.
Oh, thank you, David. That's exactly a question I wanted to ask you. A good thing that you explained it. So now that we are going to put the towers like wherever we want, this is just a question that popped up in my head. Uh, like, are we gonna put towers like in every capital of the world, or this is just like we will be putting one in, I don't know, like England? Will we be putting one in France, or there's just gonna be multiple?
Well, I think we're going to determine, like, we'll determine where those locations are, and we'll want to make sure that there is a wide kind of selection of locations that the player can choose from. So we're not going to want to put two cities too close together at the
Mhm.
outset. However, like as the game evolves, we're going to want to add more cities to it. As the population expands and as the game grows, more players want to join, want to be part of the city. We're going to, at some point, we're going to need to add more cities to the mix. Now,
Mhm.
we
That is
look at
awesome.
it as kind of like we are the curators of where these city locations are. So we're not just going to be making these determinations just on our own, but we will be taking into consideration like the perspective of the DAO. So there will be some
Mhm.
DAO involvement in determining it's like, hey, we need more cities, and we'd like cities here and here, and this kind of thing will be it'll be a combination, I guess, of the DAO and the design team at Directive, determining where these locations ultimately are and determining the frequency and the overall quantity of them throughout the world.
That's great. That's great. So I can't wait really to see the community forming cities. It's gonna be so cool, and I personally want to know who my neighbors are gonna be. It's gonna be
Yeah, that is going to be super important, right? We
yeah.
struggle with this. We struggled with this problem a lot because we have what we call internally, and I don't know if this is acceptable language for the podcast, but it's what we call it on the design team, is what happens if you end up in a city full of dicks. And this is something that we take into consideration, right? It's like, what if your neighbors are all terrible? And it's an important concern because you're going to be collaborating with the people that are in your city, and so you want to ally yourself with people that have you want a mutually beneficial relationship with the people that are around you. So it
Got
informs a
it.
lot of design decisions.
That is so cool. That is so cool. So, having said that, like now that we know about cities and lands, like in more detail, how many lands can there be in a city?
So that will depend mostly on the size of the city in terms of the total amount of land that will be within the umbrella of the tower.
Mhm.
But the city itself will at least have the center tower, the center tile where there will be the tower on it.
Mhm.
Around it, six tiles that are managed by the city council, and then everything else that is well part of the city that can be inhabited by players, managed by players, and everything that is within the city receives some kind of bonuses, as David mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
and is subject to the laws that are decided by the city council, basically. But the size itself of the city will depend mostly on the level of the tower and therefore the level of the city.
Mhm.
But we can imagine a very small city at level one. A level one city would have, I don't know, let's say 20 or 30 tiles around it, whereas a city level 5 or 10 would have something like 500
Wow,
tiles
500.
total.
That's gonna be major.
It's
It's gonna be
yeah, it
massive.
would be major. It's just example numbers, but we would be on this kind of idea of constant progression and constant expansion of the city.
That would be so awesome, to be honest. If you have one city having 500 lands, that's gonna be wow.
Yeah, well,
Right.
it's going to get, as it expands, I mean, the capabilities of it and the things you can do as a city are going to grow as well. So it's just going to require more people, more
Mhm.
resources, more input, more votes,
Yeah,
more
got
governance. So
it. More work, right?
yeah, man, more work. We
More,
call that
more work.
gameplay. We call that gameplay, Rush.
Yeah, I love it. Like to be honest. So there will be different tiers to pick from, right? So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
so that's the thing. I wanted to ask you about like the tiers and types and lands, that how are they gonna be, and if a player is limited to one land or they can purchase as many lands as they want.
Okay. So the biggest distinction between the types of land is you're going to have free lands and you're going to have paid lands. And that's the biggest kind of categorical difference. Free lands are, well, I mean, the paid lands, as the individual land tile has increases in quality, like, you're going to have to pay for it. The free stuff is going to be, it's going to be functional and it's going to allow you to do your things, but it's not going to necessarily give you the advantages that a paid land is going to have. Paid land is going to be closer to the tower. It's more likely to have higher resource output. It's going to have a number of features, and we have a system of categorizing these individual types of land quality. But the biggest ones are the difference, like the paid lands and the free lands. The paid lands give you a vote, and the lands that are a part of a city, they give you a vote and your ability to participate in governance. Whereas the free lands, they are outside of the city's protection. And it's an absolutely functional kind of free to play model, and you can upgrade your city, your land at some point to be part of the city. However, there are going to be the free lands and the paid lands. Within the paid lands themselves, it's going to be a number of smaller kind of categorical, there's going to be a categorical hierarchy. And so obviously the most premium lands are going to be the fewest in number. And as you kind of go down in quality while still having like a high level of quality, I need to turn off my phone alerts here. Sorry.
It's okay, no worries.
It's and anyway, it's going to make that distinction.
Okay, so there's going to be.
Basically, when it comes, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Basically, when it comes to the value of the land, we have a system that uses many different metrics, be it the resources, the location of the land, the space of the land, and a few other things that bring value or decrease the value of the land. And we tend to consider what is a free land or a paid land at a certain threshold of this value. Obviously, being in a city increases or within the umbrella of a city increases the value of the land by default, because it gives you all the bonuses that we talked about. Gives you a vote for a city. It gives you many connections to other players, so it's way easier to develop yourself. However, we want to have the player able to get a free land at the beginning, increase it to reach a certain amount of value, and then if they want to sell it, they can. The players should absolutely be able to invest in a land and make this investment grow and be able to sell a land that has more value than when they bought it initially.
Okay.
So yeah, as David said, the main difference that we want to have is paid land that will automatically start with a higher value, and freelance that will probably start a bit lower but still have potential to grow.
Okay, that's great. So everyone can work on the land, generate value, and then they can sell it. So when we say sell it, do we mean like exchange it with different different lands, or just sell it for the token city?
Mark just joined us kind of at a perfectly opportune time. Mark, we're
Yeah,
absolutely
perfect.
talking about like a Mark question here. So
Yeah, that's
Mark
good.
is obviously, he's our lead economy designer, so he's really digging into this stuff kind of specifically. Arash, do you want to ask the question again? Let Mark chime in on it.
Sure.
Perfect.
This is actually my question. Like let me just rephrase it then, because I want to ask the question and then I will get to the currency that we can just get from it. So the question is, if someone buys a lot of lands and never engages in the gameplay, can they expect lands that they've bought to increase in value? Like, to make it simple, what I'm really asking is, how does land generate value?
So at the moment, we're not actually limiting the number of lands that people can do. So in theory, that yes, someone can buy a lot of stuff, but while the asset itself can increase in value by market trends and what the market does, it won't actually increase in value itself without you playing the game. So what we mean by this is the land itself has a value that you will be able to see, and that value can be improved through gameplay. So if you are playing on your land and you are actively playing the game and you're increasing your value, but someone else isn't, then your land will be kind of value will be going up while theirs won't. So let's say you bought a high value land at the start. If you don't do anything to it, other lands will eventually get up to similar values than yours when they previously weren't. So by comparison, yours will be worth less because there are now more at that particular value.
Got it. That makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. So now that you mentioned that, so if someone, let's say, gets to a level, let's say they upgrade their land and now they want to sell it, do they sell it for the token or can they exchange it with another land?
You can totally change things. Well, that's kind of what we want players to do. Is we want you to get a land, to improve it, to then be able to trade it in, to then improve it, to be able to trade it in and improve. So essentially, you are you kind of progressing through the game by changing lands as well as actually improving the land directly. So what we mean by that is the way land is value is determined is by what is on the land itself, be it resources, be it and how good those resources might be how much space there is on the land. However, there are going to be realistic limits on how much you can improve a land just by like physical limitations of land. For example, if there is a mountain in your land, you can't get rid of the mountain. It's a mountain, so you will never be able to get rid of the fact that there's not a lot of space on it. So what we mean by that is it's going to be very difficult or almost impossible for someone to take a land of essentially 0 value to get it up to the highest value. You just won't be able to get it to that point because there are just certain things you won't be able to overcome. So what we expect is you'll be able to push a land so far, you can then trade it for another land that potentially has had no improvements done on it. So an almost equivalent swap. There'll be obviously a cost to this, but not a lot because they're obviously relatively similar values. But you can then obviously have a greater potential for improvement on the one you just switched for.
Okay, got it. So now that the question comes to my mind, like let's say I have a land and there's a big mountain in it, and I work on it however I can and make it as far as it can go. And now I want to exchange it or sell it. So why should another person buy this land or to get this land out of my hands?
Well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, that land might be right next to them. So they might want to just naturally expand, and perhaps the only way to expand is to that particular land because everyone else around them is purchased. It could be that your land has a particular resource that they're lacking. It could be that they just want to move to that area. It could be that they are able to improve the land in a way that you are not, by being able to take advantage of what the land actually has. So it's down to the individual player and their play style and their individual needs as to whether or not they find that land valuable or not. And it'll be very, awesome. Yeah, it's vary quite a lot.
Okay, so so that's actually very. I'm glad to hear that. But let's say I want to sell a land and I've been working on it and it has a lot of resources in it. When I sell it, does the land get reset, or I am selling the land with every building and material on it to the next person?
Yeah, exactly that. So resources, the vast majority of resources in the game are not limited. They are unlimited. So if you have a resource node, then it will just keep producing resources. I say the vast majority because there will be things that will appear on the map that you are able to take advantage of, but are time limited or like amount limited and what. It's the sort of thing you do to kind of kickstart the world, get things going, or potentially as part of an event. But like I said, the vast majority of these things will be will be permanently available on your land.
Okay, cool. So
I think he's more asking is if I build a bunch of structures on the land, is that going to be transferred to the?
Oh yeah, sorry. In that case, yes. So anything you build on the land will go with it.
Okay, so that's cool. I'm just giving the buildings and the land together to the next person. Okay, that's glad to hear it.
So I think it's not a complete solution. It's like it's not a binary situation where it's like, okay, I've got all of this stuff and I have to get rid of everything, or so like he said, like Mark was saying, the quality of your land is increased by the things that you build on it. Now you can, and we're still working through some of the finer points of this kind of situation, but say you want to pack up some of your buildings. You don't want to give them everything. There's some stuff that you want to take with you. There might be a middle ground there. Obviously, the stuff that you remove from your land is going to decrease the quality of the land, but say you don't want to just like pack it up and give it to them, lock, stock, and barrel. Like there's some things maybe that you want to preserve that you can then pack up. Again, we're still working through some of the finer points of like the design on this. However, the stuff that if you want your land to have a certain value, that value is going to be informed by the things that you have built on it. And so if you remove some of those things, land value will decrease. And so you might want to just want to have like a nice kind of bundle package. Here you go. You want to jump into the game. Like here's a perfect land that's already got all the basic infrastructure built up on it. And so
that's a really nice economy.
there's also another slight point to that, is that buildings themselves will need to be researched and have specialized in their usage. So, for example, if you buy a land that has a building on that you aren't able to use, then that building you won't be able to use it. Just because it's there doesn't necessarily mean that you can just kind of go, hey, cool, I've just managed to bypass things. So there are limitations in that regard as well.
Okay. You're still going to have to level up your town hall, for example.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
So that's not going to cut. That's not going to carry over.
Let's say you buy an apartment and you want to renovate it. So that doesn't mean that everything that came with the apartment is going to be good for you. You're just going to get rid of a lot of it.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's fair.
That's cool. So that's awesome. Now let's say someone wants to purchase a good number of lands. What's the benefit of owning more than one land, and what's the benefit of having higher tier lands compared to lower tier ones?
Well, I mean, I don't know. This is another Mark question. Mark, you want to tackle that one?
Okay.
There's always a value of owning multiple lands, and at its basic thing, owning a land increases the number of buildings that you're allowed to build and increases the number of workers you're allowed to have. So any land you get will increase those values. So it's always a good thing to have more. But I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that a land that you buy might have a resource that you don't previously have. It might have more of a resource that you have, but you've always needed more. So there's a lot of benefits. And then also the actual space itself. Buildings take space. More land, it means you actually have an option of where you want to put these.
Okay, that makes sense. So more land, more space, so you can just put more stuff on it, right? So so a higher tier land, like, do we have something like that, like a land that has more resources compared to lower tier lands, even if all of them are paid?
Yes, absolutely. We're going to have, like I said earlier, we're going to have various degrees of land quality, and so we will have the highest tier land, and it's going to have all the bells and whistles. We'll have lower tier land that is still paid land, but still is going to give you an advantage over your base kind of your base level land, your base free land. But so they're not all going to be. It's not going to be, it's got all the bells and whistles, or it's got none. It's going to there's going to be a scale.
Got it. So, do we have an estimate of the land prices, or is it just too early to ask? I mean, like, what I'm trying to ask is if lands, regardless of their tiers, are going to be affordable by anyone and not just whales.
So this is another economy question, because there's a lot of moving parts here, right?
Yeah.
But there is going to be like the highest tier premium quality land, and the value of that, the price of that, is going to be affected by a lot of things. It's going to be affected by the market. It's going to be affected by like population density. But I'm hesitant to speculate like right now about the prices, but like the highest quality stuff's not going to be cheap. But at the same time, we don't want to price people out of like of quality paid lands. So we are also going to make sure that there is high quality stuff that is affordable to people at large scale.
Okay.
Yep. And as I mentioned, the big part of the land owning is the improvement of it. So what you might choose to do is to pick a land that has a really high potential, but a lot of difficulty to overcome. So you can go, actually, you know what, I can see some of these negative things on this, which is bringing the land value down. So I'm going to go into buying that land knowing that these negatives are here, but I'm going to be able to kind of take advantage of the other positive parts of it. So I can kind of improve that value. And then once I've made those improvements, I can potentially sell it to someone else, and then again buy a different one and kind of slowly work your way up.
That's very interesting. So it's not just playing by the economy of the game. You have to somehow devise your own economy and plans for the game as well, how you want to play it.
What do you mean exactly, devise your own economy?
I mean, you have to decide, okay, so I would like to have this much smaller tiers of lands, work on them and sell them, rather than just go all in and buy a higher tier land or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we want to encourage that, right? There are things that we're really looking for in terms of the population of the world, the number of cities that we've got. So we want to maintain a high level of player density. We want players kind of grouped together that are actively doing stuff on their land. Like, we don't want people just parking and buying like a premium land and then not doing anything with it. So we're definitely going to encourage that. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for players that want to buy land and then spend a lot of time increasing the quality. And then, and then they can maybe upgrade and they can trade it. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there.
That's going to be very interesting. So, like, one off-topic question. I mean, it's just on topic, but I just wanted to ask you: will we have lands on South Pole? Because I really want to buy one there.
I don't. Well, you want to buy land in Antarctica?
It's fun. I cannot go there. Like, I don't know whether I can ever go there. So I wouldn't mind having a land there.
Yeah, but you can have land there. You're not going to be able to do anything on it. Nothing grows. Nothing flows. It's just mountainous and ice.
Polar bears.
It's going to be difficult, man. Possibly. I'm not ruling the possibility out. However, we're going to be focusing on lands that you can do stuff with initially. So
yeah,
maybe we'll explore some ice technology. Who knows?
There are a couple of essentially extreme lands that we wouldn't advertise to somebody. But if somebody really, really wants to have it, then in theory, yes.
Okay.
Go for it.
That would be cool still. Okay,
could be cool. Could be really cool. And who knows what to say, because we haven't designed out all of the technology that's going to appear in some of our later eras. So, perhaps land becomes increasingly scarce and we have to really kind of strike out into these nether regions of the globe. So, yeah, exactly.
Right. That's gonna be fun, to be honest. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the topic now. My next question is going to be about freelance. Like, what are they? How can players get access to them? And how many of these freelance can a player own at the same time?
Well, free lands are going to be available to everybody. You can pick up a free land without owning a land, and you can also own, you can buy a land and then pick up a free land to complement that. However, we're going to limit the amount of free lands that are available to individual players based on the amount of work that they do to improve that land. So in order to own multiple free lands, you're going to need to increase the quality of your first free lands, if that makes sense. So say you buy a piece of land and then you pick up another piece of land for free. In order to pick up a third land or a second piece of free land, you're going to need to increase that quality of that first piece of free land to a certain level. And again, this all feeds back into a system that maintains activity in the game space, right? So we don't want people just scooping up all the free lands and then sitting on them doing nothing with them. So if you want to get a piece of free land, you got to maintain it, you got to improve it. Once you improve it to a certain extent, you can pick up another piece of free land. If you are actively maintaining all of these free lands, like we're probably not going to limit the amount of free lands that you can take in terms of but we're gonna restrict it by how much work you're doing to improve each piece of free land that you own, and we're going to gate the purchase of that next free land by the improvement of your existing free lands.
Okay, that's pretty nice. So if you want a second free land, you're gonna have to work on your first free land, make it reach a certain level and get that, and then another one, and then another one. But
if you want a third one, you're gonna have to improve like the quality of both your first and second free lands.
Got it. So
to a higher value.
Okay.
To a higher value as well. So each time you add one, the requirement of quality on all your existing ones increases as well. So it's not just a case of improving the one you've just got; it's improving all of them.
Okay, got it. So you have to work on all of them, definitely. So what we're saying that is people can still earn, however small, by just playing for free on a free land if they want to make money.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, yes, absolutely. We are focusing on the gameplay first, and as an opportunity to simply just make money. It's consideration for us, but it is a secondary consideration. Like, we are focusing primarily on the integrity of the gameplay for the entire world, and so we want to make sure that there's that activity.
That definitely makes sense. So I just wanted to say that this is actually going to be a free game for everyone, but still you can somehow earn, however small, by having no assets in the game, like haven't paid for any assets. But
having a sustainable free-to-play path through this game is something that is very important to us, and something that we will ensure that we're maintaining throughout the course of Civitas's design.
Nice. That's exactly what I wanted to like point out. That's
Yeah,
awesome, to be honest. Okay.
yeah,
So one more point on the freelance. So during the chosen mint that happened some time ago, there is the Dominus Trait that only 100 of the chosens received, where they will be rewarded a free land. Do we know
yeah.
what tier land or what kind of land this free land is gonna be?
I- it's it's kind of it's upper tier mids, right? It's not going to be the highest quality. You're not going to unlock like the premium, the absolute top tier freelands, but it is
Mhm.
going to be it's going to be way better than a free land. It's going to be better than most of the paid lands. So we're looking at like an upper mid tier for the paid land.
Nice. So lucky those 100 chosens. Right.
Right, right. So if it was in it's going to be A tier, not S tier. It's going to be A tier if you're
A
looking
tier.
at it on a tier list. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, A tier.
That is still a good tier.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Thanks for sharing that with me. So, okay, now that I've asked the most general questions about lands, I would like to refer a little to eras. Could you please let us know about the eras in general and what era will players start at?
Um, Yeah, sure. Everybody's gonna. Well, okay. So we went through a lot of kind of conversations and ideation about how we were going to structure the world. Are we going to stick to history specifically, and
Hmm.
are we going to limit ourselves? But in that, it gives us some guidance, but at the same time, it restricts us in a way that isn't necessarily conducive to
Yeah.
creating compelling gameplay. So because when we started we're like, okay, are we starting in the Neolithic era, are we starting in the Bronze era, and instead of kind of categorizing things by specific technology, even though we do that, we're just calling them, it's just the first era right now, right? As opposed to, so that way we're not stuck in a specific vein of technology. So that first era is definitely going to be Neolithic, and it's going to expand into early Bronze. uh,
Hmm.
right now we've got plans for 6 big eras, each era divided up into smaller sub eras. So it's more of we want it to be kind of an organic growth process, but at the same time, we structure it in a way where we introduce specific resources and specific technology with a long term aspiration of really getting into outer space, interplanetary. Like that's our ambition for the long term game, right? And so all the systems that we're building now, we want to make sure that they work throughout like this progression of eras. But we will have things like, we will have medieval, we will have industrial, we will have more advanced computer eras. And so but we're not kind of strictly categorizing them
Hmm.
at this point, but just kind of like identifying our trajectory and how we're subdividing that. And so the first era and the second era, they're probably going to be referred to in the game as the first era or the second era, but
Hmm.
rather than kind of lock it into a specific kind of technological slice of human history.
Got it. That's gonna be interesting. So that we're gonna just gonna put the name of era on them, but they might have like historical ties as well.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Hmm.
if you look at human history as well, in different parts of the world, humans actually advanced completely differently. So, the actual year in history when a particular civilization reached a particular technology can vary by hundreds of years. So, even if we picked one to try and follow, that another one in another part of the world would be vastly different.
Okay. So I hope like moving from one era to another doesn't take 100 years here in Civitas. But like that's exactly what my next question. How long will it take for a player that constantly plays the game to upgrade from one era to the next?
So the eras will not be per player or per city, or eras will be worldwide in the sense of
Hmm.
the history of Civitas will be developed. The next era will be unlocked for everyone at the same time. So it will not be like, oh, I am in the Neolithic, whereas my neighbor is in the Middle Ages. Everybody is in the Middle Ages or in the Neolithic, but it takes some time for the player within the Neolithic, for example, to get from very basic technology to more advanced technology, such as pottery or something like this, that were discovered in the Neolithic
Okay,
or
so that's a
antiquity.
good point. Mhm. Continue, please. Your turn.
Yeah. So as Mark and David told, we will have multiple sub eras that, in the same way, will be developed for the entire uh, the entire population, and just um, every time increase the tree of technology that the player can develop.
That is interesting. So that's exactly what my next question was going to be, which you answered already. I wanted to ask you, like, what if, for example, I buy a land that I want to start? Should I start from scratch when my neighbor is building skyscrapers? Am I starting from, I don't know, the Bronze Age when there is like a modern city next to me? But now you said that it's not going to be land based.
Well, basically, if everybody is at the modern era,
Hmm.
maybe your neighbor will have a town that is level 10 and will have indeed skyscraper,
Hmm.
and you yourself will be in the same era but level 1, so you will have smaller building that need more improvement.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not gonna be a temporal difference between neighbors.
Okay, so that
Well,
means
we'll
if it's now continue.
uh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to say we're probably going to. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for us to have like you know, mud huts next to skyscrapers.
Yeah.
So we'll probably remove some of like the more basic pieces of like you know, functional structural technology, and so we'll probably raise those defaults on some of those things like as the you know, as the eras progress. So
Hmm.
you, like I said, we're not going to have mud huts next to, you know, next to towering skyscrapers. We're probably going to require that people build, you know, simple brick houses or some, you know, something a little bit more consistent with the era. But at the same time, we want to encourage people to go through that full gameplay experience.
Yeah.
Got it.
Um,
Got it. So,
and
what?
we
Mhm.
so we know there will need to be catch-up mechanics as well,
Yeah,
because
yeah, for
let's say the
sure.
game's been playing for 3 years and someone joins. We don't
Yeah,
want to have
exactly.
to make them go through 3 years worth of gameplay to be able to catch
Oh
up with
no.
everything else.
Yeah,
However, at this
exactly.
point, so we know we're going to need them, but as to what they are right now, I mean,
Mhm.
we're more focused on what the actual main systems are going to be at this point.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Like I was considering, I was just imagining next land is having like skyscrapers. What I have to start building from scratch.
Yeah,
That would
like
be
flint axes and stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
We're gonna make sure that those things are tied up like a little bit more elegantly. But
awesome.
yeah, like Mark said, and you know, having those catch up mechanics will be very important for subsequent eras.
Got it. But still, moving from era one to era two, for example, this is not going to take in 1 or 2 months, right? This is going to be longer.
No, no, no. We expect. Uh, you know, we obviously we need to. We're just designers. Like we need to validate all of our scope aspirations
Hmm.
with production. So we can't just say it's going to take this much time because there are a lot of company considerations that tie into how much time we actually spend upgrading an era. But our initial aspiration slash intention for it is to be something like 1 year to maybe
Wow,
max of 2 years. That's for major era changes, with
major.
each of those eras being broken down into between 2 and 4 sub eras. So we are making the distinction between the eras by introducing a few key resources and
Hmm.
increasing like the technological capabilities. So, you know, it might make sense. And again, a lot of moving parts are going to inform the decision about how long it takes for us to upgrade an era. But it'll be, my expectation is that it will be a minimum of a year, and that we will
Okay.
have in significant changes during that year, and there will be upgradability. But you know, when you moving from the industrial era, you know, into the modern era, I mean, or moving from, you know, something that's more medieval into the industrial, this significant change of the entire gameplay
Yeah,
landscape. So it's going
that's
to take
pretty
time
cool.
to build that stuff. Yeah, for sure.
So that means like the city has to work so hard and very consistently to be able to move from era one to two, from two to three, and something like that. And it's gonna take years to actually
It's
finish.
going to take time. It's going to take
Yeah.
time. Yeah, and we'll find the right
Okay.
balance though.
Well,
Well,
that's
you know,
cool.
get it out fast enough. We don't want people to get stuck or stagnant, you know, in their.
Mhm.
So by introducing that content, like with a nice kind of rhythm to it, it's going to be very important.
That's
Yep.
actually pretty cool. So that exactly bring me to my next question. Do we know what Civitas will look like in, let's say, 5 or 10 years after launch? Are we gonna have spaceships then?
Hope so. Yeah, that's the plan. That's absolutely the plan. Absolutely
Oh
the
my
plan.
god.
Well, I mean, you think about all of these things. If we take the way that you're organizing your city, your structure, what if we move the technology off planet? So then all of a sudden we've got kind of like orbiting structures, space station style structures. They're going to be very modularly constructed,
Wow.
just like we are subdividing the land on Earth, right? So we are absolutely taking these kinds of interplanetary
That is so
considerations
cool.
into our
I mean,
into our game
I'm,
design.
I'm just thinking, like, for example, in 10 years, I would say that I was someone who started from, I don't know, mud huts and
Started in the
working
mud
so hard,
hut.
and I'm in space now.
Yeah. There's a space elevator. I've got
Super
I've got
OG.
a colony on Mars. Let's go.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That is awesome. Okay, that's awesome. Uh, okay, so now my next question is gonna be a little like tied to logistics. Let's get back to the lands. I would say, let's say I have two lands that are not adjacent to one another, and there are a few
Mm,
neighbors in between. Can these two lands be connected somehow?
Yep, absolutely. This is another Mark question because he worked out all the details about how to make this functional. So Mark, why don't you go ahead
Nice.
and dig into it?
Cool. So we have the concept of connected lands and unconnected lands. So a connected land essentially has to be directly adjacent to one of your existing ones and has to have an unbroken road that goes from one to the other. Now you can have as many lands as you want in a chain. So you could have, if you want 5, 6 lands in a long chain to drive it, to make a really, really long road. If you want to, they would all count as connected. And if they're connected, they essentially act as one single land. So we're talking one inventory, one town hall running all, it's as if you're playing with one set of
Mhm.
buildings. However, unconnected lands are any lands that are essentially don't have a connected road, an unbroken road between them. Now, this could be two lands that are next to each other without the road yet, or it could be two lands that are miles apart, like really, really far away from each other.
Mhm.
Now, in order to move things between those two lands, which essentially count as separate inventories and separate areas of items, you need what's called a shipping warehouse. A shipping warehouse is a building that you unlock at a particular town hall level, but what it does is it allows you to send logistics convoys. So you click on the building, you decide that you want to send a convoy out, you choose its target, well, as in where is this convoy going, and the game will then tell you, oh, if you want to go here, here is the route that we're going to take to get to it, and the game will attempt to find a route for you. And again, you'll have a couple of choices. For example, do you want the fastest route or do you just want the safest route? So fastest route would be essentially if there's any roads that exist through neighbors, for example, it will try and follow those, but it essentially as the crow flies. Whereas the safest route will try to go through neighboring lands. Now, these will obviously have a big impact on the overall time it will take. So it will calculate, oh, if you want to take this route, it will take you this much food and you will need this many people to take with it. And if, for example, you want this quickest route, it will go, okay, this is more dangerous. So it might warn you that, oh, you're going through this particular land and this land has lots of blight all over it. So don't just send the convoy because there's a good chance it's not going to get there.
You
So
do need to come packing. Yeah.
exactly. So you'll need troops to go with you.
Oh, I have a lot of questions regarding logistics.
Yes,
Yeah, well,
logistics is a big one.
Yeah.
a big consideration. The big thing that's important to recognize is that if you got two pieces of land that are right next to each other, it's going to function like a single land tile. You're going to be able to move stuff around very easily. Obviously, like Mark said, they will have to be connected by roads in order to support that. But if you have two pieces of land that are very close to each other, then one piece of land way off in the distance or in the wildlands, it's going to be a tabbed kind of experience. You're going to have to move between them, so that's not going to be one single unified kind of tile. And so there is going to be a lot of incentive we're encouraging players to pick up lands that are next to each other. It's just going to simplify things. It's going to expand all of your abilities and
That
much
is so cool.
easier to manage.
That is so cool. That is exactly what I wanted to tell the community, that we're gonna have a dedicated podcast just for logistics, and because it's gonna need its own.
It is intricate
Yeah,
and complicated. Yeah.
it's massive. I mean, just see how if we were just talking about just one road. Now imagine how many questions we can ask about that. It's gonna be cool. Okay, thank you very much for sharing that with me. Now, what about proximity? Like, do players have to take into account where they should build their buildings, or are they free to decide where on land they should put them? Like, what I'm trying to say, let's say, for example, I have a switch system and kitchen. Is it okay if I build them next to each other?
We don't, well, we haven't addressed that specific scenario simply because we haven't gotten to, we're still in an relatively early spot in the timeline where so the sewage system is probably something that's going to be an important consideration as we progress down this, in a subsequent era. However, proximity is going to be important for logistics, definitely. The closer things are, the shorter, the smaller the time that it takes for things to be transferred between them. But, we're going to continue to keep an eye out for these kind of considerations, such as your example specifically, because it does make the world a little bit more rich and realistic, and we want to constantly give the player strategic considerations. Now,
Nice.
the blight is going to be an important consideration, and the fog right out of the gate. And so the farther apart you have structures built on your land tile, the more energy you're going to have to expend keeping the paths between those buildings, those structures, illuminated. So like that fog is always going to be an important strategic consideration. So initially, you're going to want to keep stuff closer together. It's going to cost less money to keep everything lit up, and and that maintenance of the land it's going to require fewer workers. But if you spread things out to disparate parts of your land tile, like I said, you're going to have to keep that whole path illuminated. It's going to require more workers specifically dedicated to removing the rot and the blight and maintaining the illumination to prevent the fog from encroaching.
That is so cool. I understand. I totally understand that. Now that you're talking about like the fog and blight, I was just thinking. Let's say I have like two lands that are further from each other, and there's a neighbor in between, and
Yep.
I'm working super hard. My lands are super clean, but my neighbor is like fully blighted, and there's just
Yeah.
like destroyed by the blight. Now my convoy has to move through this like land, so that means I will have to just go through blight because my neighbor wasn't working properly.
Well, I mean, is it the only path? That's going to be one consideration.
Yeah.
We've been talking on the design team that do we want to allow you to go into somebody else's land tile and clean out their rot and their blight? I don't know. And we haven't really come to a conclusion on that yet. However, it does seem like something that would make sense. We've got an inactive or relatively inactive land tile in between my two land tiles. Like, it'd be easy for me to go in and kind of clear out some of that light and rot, maintain those roadways. So yeah, like I said, we haven't come to a conclusion on that yet. However, we are leaning towards allowing you to remove those things from neighboring land tiles if your neighbor doesn't. It could be. I mean, but then we've got to think of it from the perspective of the person whose land tile you are making modifications to. Like, does it work for both players? And I'm not sure that we've got an answer that we're totally happy with yet. But right now we are in the direction of letting players.
I understand. So
this is one of the reasons, though, where we're just advising players to buy lands or have lands next to each other. Because
just buy it. It's easier.
The adjacent lands just make everything a lot easier.
I was just thinking about that achievement unlocked. The achievement name is going to be Need a Hand. So
there you go.
This is going to be very interesting. Okay. So now I want to move further for the lands, and let's move out of the safe confinement of the tower. Could you please explain about the wildlands and safe lands, and if players can purchase lands in the wildlands right after the beginning, right when the game starts?
This is a David question. David, go ahead.
Sorry, what?
The wildlands.
The wildlands.
The wildlands and safe lands.
What is the difference between the wildlands and the safe lands?
Yeah, like what's the difference between them, and if players can choose to buy lands in the wildlands right out of the back, like when they were
right from the start of the game? Not really, because we want to first of all have a period where the players are concentrated in the safe land, just for first of all evaluate the population that we will get, as well as let the players learn the game, have some senior players among them. But once we open the Wildlands, players will be able to purchase the land in the Wildlands if they so decide. We will obviously advise against it for new players, in the sense of you're new, you don't have your first town hall. Please consider a safe land, a city, or the surrounding of a city before
Yeah.
trying to jump in the wildlands. But yeah, technically they will be able to purchase land in the wildlands if they so decide.
Okay.
It
So,
will, yeah.
so what is a wildland? Like, what's the difference between a wildland and safe land? What dangers are there in the wildlands that the players really should be careful when they're moving there?
So first of all, the distinction between the wildland and the safe land is the proximity to the closest tower. If you're inside a city, you're in safe land. If you're relatively close around the city, like imagine the suburbs of the city, you're still in the safe land.
Okay.
Even though you're not protected by the tower anymore, you're still within the safe land. You will have less problem with the blight, the fog, and the monsters. And on the other hand, you will have less resources or less rich resources. You will not find the most precious ones. The wildlands are after a certain threshold distance from the closest tower. You are not only not protected by the tower, but everything around you becomes way wilder in the sense of you have
That's more
more
dangerous.
like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
you,
was just agreeing. I'm just chiming in. Yeah. But
fair
but
enough.
well, the big difference, right? It's the tower kind of protection, right? So the wildlands are like they're dangerous, and so there's going to be kind of a sweet spot in between where it's like it's not a paid land, but it is on the outskirts of a city, so it still enjoys some protection from the tower, even though relatively light compared to maybe things that are a bit closer, tiles that are a bit closer. But when you get into the wildlands, it's high stakes survival gameplay. So we're not going to want players to start in the wildlands, because in the wildlands the big thing is the incursion of the blight. So the fog and the rot and the blight are much more aggressive. The blighted creatures that come out of the blight and kind of encapsulate your buildings, that stuff's going to happen a lot more frequently. And in the wildlands, you can lose all of your stuff. Right, everything you build, it can be destroyed in a way that things can't when you're close enough to a tower to enjoy some of that protection. So that's why the wildlands you shouldn't be starting in the wildlands, but all the wildlands are going to be free, right? They're not like the paid lands are going to be close to a tower. So the wildlands, you're going to have to voyage out there, you're going to have to maintain it, and if you want to have multiple tiles in the wildlands, it's the same principle that applies to all wildlands. So you have to maintain it and you have to upgrade it in quality in order to pick up another one. So the wildlands are dangerous, and the safe lands are, as described,
Safe.
considerably more safe. If you're in a safe land, if you're close enough to a city, your land tile is not going to be destroyed by the blight. You get out into the wildlands, we remove all of those training wheels.
Okay, so you mentioned that wildlands are also freelance, right? So that means
No.
Yeah, that sounded a little bit weird as I said it. Like, I think go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
So
chime in.
the way that land value is determined is what works out whether a land is free or not. And the metrics by which we determine the value for wildlands are far more extreme than they are in these safe lands. So within safe lands, for example, we guarantee that you will have wood. We guarantee that you will have stone. We guarantee that you'd have food or water for your workers and your population. But those guarantees go out the window when you're talking about wildlands. So you could find a wildland that has no food on it, or no water, or no wood at all. So those negatives really can drag the value of a wildland down. And as a result, a lot of them will fall into the category of essentially free lands because of these huge negative things that come with it. However, there will occasionally be essentially a diamond in the rough, whereby you will find one whereby while it has a lot of negative traits, it's offset by some very strong positive ones. So, for example, you might find a wildland that has no wood on it at all. However, it's got loads of stone, and the stone on it is extremely rich veins. And rich veins mean you can mine it at a much faster rate than you can in the safe lands. And there may be more of them. So, for example, if you're allowed, say, 3 quarries in the safe lands, you could have maybe 6 or 7 of them on this wildland at a higher rate. So that one land can pump out stone at a really, really high rate, potentially out faster than 3 or even 4 lands put together. However, you've got a massive logistics amount of work to be able to kind of get up to that, because all of the wood would have to be shipped down there. So
and you need to supply them food, and you need to do you need to send everything to them in order to maintain sustainability.
Okay, so that means like you should have a very strong land in safe land, and just try to like support your troops and your cargo and logistics to whenever you're traveling to the wildland.
So I mentioned the shipping warehouse earlier. That's actually gated by a town hall level as well. So if you have a land in the safe lands, you can't even build a shipping warehouse to a certain level, which means you can't ship anything to a wildland, even if you were to get it. So that's one of our mechanisms to, protect players from accidentally, buying lands or essentially getting something which they don't have the means to properly use or properly protect.
Got it. That's actually pretty nice. Okay, thank you very much for sharing these details with me. This is going to be very interesting to see how people like upgrade their land and start like moving out of the safe lands towards the wildlands, towards more dangerous areas.
Sure. And we've still got some finer points to work out on some of these things, I think. But yeah, I think we've got a good direction for it, and a clear distinction between the kind of gameplay that's going to take place on both.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. So, I would like to ask one more thing about land, and then another question, which is about governance, and then we can wrap it up. So, for my next question, I'd like to ask you about crystals and the role they play in the land generation. Could you please explain how crystals would work when it comes to land?
Well, it depends on who wants to tackle this one.
So, from an economic standpoint, crystals are essentially improve parts of land. It's not the only thing that improve your lands. It's one of 2 methods to improve your lands. But fragments turn into crystals, and crystals again combined into refined crystals. But these crystals and refined crystals can be used to add fissures to your land. They can also be placed into the fissures to provide bonuses to the nearby buildings. However, the crystals themselves are pretty random. So when you generate one, it generates a particular set of stats that it does. And once you've got it, you're like, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to keep this crystal, or do I want to potentially combine it with others? So you're kind of hunting for the right ones. Or if you get one that's really powerful, you could sell it on the market to other people. So, for example, let's say you're really into producing soldiers. You might find one that's really good at stone production, but you're like, well, I don't really care about stone production. I'm a warrior guy. I'm all about my troops. So what I'll do is I'll sell that, and I'll use that to then buy one that does benefit that allows me to train faster. So there is quite a lot of randomization in them, but there is a certain level of control that the players will have. You will be able to modify the stats of a crystal slightly. You will also be able to improve the stats of crystal. So when you really do get a good one, you can kind of really maximize the power of that crystal. So
when you put it in a fissure that you said to upgrade whatever you want to upgrade, it's done. It burns into the system.
Correct. The crystal is consumed when it's put into it. You can't then take that crystal out either. So it is a permanent process. You can replace it, but you can't take it out.
Okay.
And as part of taking it out, it would be recycled. And essentially this dust that they would be essentially recycled into, we don't have a name for it at the moment, but this dust would be used by the system to improve the crystals that you do have. So what we do expect you to do essentially is you'll get a number of crystals that they're either for whatever reason they just don't roll well, you're just not interested in them, or they're just of low quality, and you end up turning those into dust to improve the ones you do want to keep hold of.
Okay. So that means like you still can replace them somehow, but you just get the
Oh yeah,
dust out of it.
yeah.
It's
So
you won't get the crystal out of it.
no. So
Right.
you can start the game with some basic crystals, because having a bonus is still better than having no bonus. So again, you start the game. You one of our chosen holders. You've had some fragments build up. You turn it into a crystal, and hey, cool! You've got some crystals that boost wood and stone production. Great, they are immediately good for you. So you put them in your fissures. However, 3-6 months down the line, you've been playing for a bit more, you've got some more fragments, you've actually turned some of these crystals into refined crystal. Now refined crystals have both more bonuses and better bonuses. So cool, now I can actually replace that one with a better one, and as a part of the process I can get some dust out of it as well.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So that's exactly what I want to say. Like, we will have a dedicated episode about fragments and crystals and go over their functionality in the game as well, because there's going to be a lot more questions around that, and we can definitely explain everything in much more details and with a lot more examples for the community to actually have a wider, let's say, information regarding like what it's going to be about. Okay. Cool. Okay, David, you want to say something?
No. I was just agreeing.
Okay, cool. So for my last question, I'd like to ask about the lands that and governance. Can players use them to vote? And if they can, does value, age, or tier also play a role?
In a city, if a player has his land inside a city, he has one vote. Everybody is equal on that. That you can be rich, you can be poor, you have one vote, and the only thing that you can vote for, or the only status, sorry, that you can have that is different than normal citizen would be if you're part of the council. In the case of the council, you would be the one proposing the laws that the players, the citizens, would be voting for. But yeah, there is no such thing as this citizen is more a citizen than this other citizen. Everybody is equal. Then
Okay.
yeah, this is not communism.
Cool. So, but still, like, if you have a land, you will be considered a citizen.
Yeah, I think there's a point to consider here, and that is that that owning the land and having that land deed is what gives you voting rights. And so as cities expand and some free lands become like paid lands with all the protections of the tower, there might be, and again, we haven't figured out exactly how we're going to move forward with this, but we know that it's an important consideration, is that we should possibly be giving some increased kind of value or maybe some voting weight to the original, like to the old schoolers, right? It's like you get in early and you're in there and you're helping a city develop from the very beginning. You're nice and close to the tower, like, and then we expand the city out, and then all of a sudden we add another 50 or 100, voting land tiles to the city itself. We don't want those OG players to kind of get diluted out of the system, and we still want, so there is something that we are continuing to work through, and that's the voting weight that you might have as an early kind of adopter, or like one of the original city founders, or even getting in at an era that's earlier than somebody else, like as the city grows. So this is something that that voting weight is something that we're looking at as a possible way of kind of incentivizing people to get in there early and to stick with the city through its entire development. And as the city grows, to not get kind of lost. We add 100 land tiles, all of a sudden the political dynamics of the city shift. Like, we still want to give, like, we want to preserve some of that kind of weight and authority that the original city founders had.
Yeah, the founding fathers were going to have more power.
Well, the founders, I mean, yeah, well, like I said, we don't want them to get kind of like washed out of this city that they helped build. They, they're there at the beginning, they develop the city, they make it super appealing to people. All of a sudden, a bunch of people are attracted. We expand the size of the city, and then all of a sudden, like, they have no more kind of voting weight, and they go from being like a majority kind of voice with that is acted in the best interests of the tower and the city's development, and then all of a sudden they're in the minority. And so it's a complex problem that we're going to continue working through as we develop the cities and the governance, but it is something that we're going to be taking into consideration, definitely.
Okay, cool. So it's a work in progress, but later,
It's still looking progress, yes,
eventually,
sir.
okay, eventually we'll have that. Okay, that's very nice. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap this up? Any points of inspiration?
No, I think that covers everything. Is there something lingering that I wanted to? No, man, I think we've covered quite a lot of information, and there will be
Oh yeah.
subsequent podcasts that we'll be following up on. So
Oh yeah, definitely. We're definitely gonna have more podcasts regarding crystals, regarding fragments, regarding like logistics and everything. They are gonna be like major as major as this one, definitely. And we're gonna have one regarding the chosens because we haven't talked about them yet, and people really need to hear what we have to say. Okay, which is cool. So thank you very much, David and Mark, for answering all my questions. There may be more questions that the community would like to add to this, and I will try gathering them all. And if the questions are enough, we can have a community ask questions episode after we finish the game design ones. That's going to be
that would be
also.
good. That'd be very cool. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah, I
great.
mean, I'm sure they're gonna be they'll be adding a lot more questions that I might have forgotten or we haven't thought of. But yeah,
Well,
that's
it's great because it gives us. There's a lot of things that sometimes make we are not necessarily considering because we're approaching it from a very gameplay integrity of the world, and sometimes some of these points that come in from the community is like, oh wow, we didn't think about that. So definitely, we definitely want to see those questions and comments, and we look forward to having an opportunity to find and provide great answers for the community.
that's awesome. So yeah, I thank the audience for listening to us as well. And as David said, don't hesitate to ping us on Discord if you had any questions that you would like
Yep.
to ask the team. Ping us, and I will try to gather your questions. And if they're enough, we can have a community ask questions episode as well. So
All right, everybody, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
thank you very much. Thank
And
you, Mark. Thank you,
thanks for
David.
putting this together. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye,
Goodbye.
folks. Bye.
All right. Cheers, guys.